Welcome to Go Time. This isn't Go Time. This isn't Go Time. Sorry, old habits die hard. Welcome to Fallthrough, a podcast about technology, software, and computing from the Go perspective. Now, this is episode 0, so we got to introduce ourselves. What is Fallthrough, and what the heck does it mean to be from the Go perspective? Well, to start, let's talk about this name. And hold on, I know. It'll all make sense in a moment. We picked the name Fallthrough because it's a Go keyword. And it's a very special Go keyword. You see, when you use a switch statement in Go, and when you use the case statements inside of that switch statement, when you reach the end of that case block, you return back outside of the switch statement. You're done. Finished. You go back to normal control flow. But if you want to actually go to the next case statement, you can use this special keyword, Fallthrough. It allows you to just continue going in this non-normative space. Something that's familiar, you're still within the same switch statement, but different. You have different parameters that you are assumed to be under. That's why Fallthrough exists in Go. But why did we name a show that? Well, if you come from our predecessor show, Go Time, you know that A, Go Time is retiring at the end of this year, and B, Go Time was a podcast that was about Go, both the programming language and its community. A few of us from Go Time decided that we wanted to continue Go Time, but make it slightly different. We didn't want to make a clone or migrate the show somewhere else. We wanted to let Go Time retire, and start something new, but that was still very familiar. That is, the case statement of Go Time needed to come to an end, but we weren't ready to exit the switch statement yet. So, we didn't. And that's what this podcast is. Something familiar, but also fresh and new. And how are we making it fresh and new? Well, let's talk about Go Time for a second. Go Time is a podcast that ran over 5 years. And over the course of that 5 years, we shipped 340 episodes. It's a huge number. And because of how slow Go is to change, the back catalog of Go Time still proves extremely useful to this day. You can go back to episodes that have double-digit numbers and still get accurate and useful information out of them. You can still have code that was written in that era that compiles and works today. This means that after 340 episodes, we'd covered a lot, a huge amount, when it comes to the Go community and the Go programming language. With Go Time retiring and going out on a high note, we decided that we could take that spirit of Go Time, take that spirit of covering the Go programming language and its community, and put a little bit of a twist on it. So instead of just covering the Go programming language and its community and our content, we're going to add a third thing that we do. And that's actually going to be the main thing that we do, which is creating content from the perspective of Go. That's both from the perspective of the programming language and the perspective of its community. In this episode, we're going to talk more about what it means to create content from the perspective of Go. And we're also going to talk about our aspirations for the type of content that we want to create for this podcast. But before we get into that, it's only fair that I actually introduce you to the other hosts of this podcast. And up first, we have a voice that you likely recognize, and that is the voice of Ian Wester-Lopshire. How are you doing today, Ian?
I am great. Excited about this new endeavor. I love the idea. I'm thinking about this as a Go-ish podcast, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, I like that. Go-ish. All right, and then we have 2 new hosts that we're going to introduce. First up, we have Matthew Sanabria. How are you doing today, Matthew?
Hey, I'm good. I actually never used Fallthrough before in Go, so I have the Go playground open right now, and I'm just curious of how its behavior really works. So, I had to. I'm sorry.
I feel like that's part of what makes it a great name, is it's something that like most Gophers know about, but have not used. And also the symbolism of it fit so well. I mean, it's just right there.
Yeah, no, I just had questions. I was like, do you automatically fall through to the next case, or do you evaluate the next case like first? And that was my big question.
I actually don't know the answer to that.
It looks like you just fall right through it, and you don't evaluate the actual like Boolean logic of the case statement. You just go to execution.
Yes, that is the only way that makes sense.
It's just a don't break.
Right. I was just curious. I was like, is that really how it works? Okay, cool. Because that's how it works in other places that you have a fall through. I was just curious. So don't mind me. That was what I was doing.
I do believe it's one of the only keywords that's just like, no, just continue with what the code is doing. I think everything else like actually like moves you somewhere else in the code when you use it a keyword like continue or break or go to. So it's a very unique keyword within Go. And one of the few that is actually two words just kind of shoved together. Although there used to be a little bit of lore here, some Go keywords that were just like sentences that were just in the compiler for some reason. I don't remember what they are, but I think they got removed at some point. It was fascinating. Anyway, we're already getting on tangents. This is already like Go time. We have a fourth host to introduce, and that is Dylan Bourque. How are you doing today, Dylan?
I'm good. I'm excited. This will be my first foray into for real podcasting. I was a one-time guest on Go Time for the episode recently about lightning talks. Been around for a long time, been doing Go for almost 10 years now, so hopefully I'll have good things to contribute and looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can't wait for unpopular opinions.
Yeah, we've already heard some hot takes, so look forward to that.
That is the panel of us, as a little podcasting crew here. So let's jump in and let's talk about broadening the purview of what was Go Time, creating a podcast from the perspective of Go. Dylan, why don't you go first? Let's talk about what are you excited to potentially talk about? Not making promises here, where we have some like ideas of things we'd like to discuss. What would you like to discuss in the future?
I don't know. I've always been of the opinion that Go is not and was never meant to be a language for all the things. It definitely has strengths. Coming from a C# background, that really was a language that was targeted at being the one programming language that you can use to do all of your tasks. It was a shift, so it'll be interesting to kind of talk around those boundaries of what Go is not good at and how far you can push those boundaries. I did a talk at GopherCon last year about not injecting OOP principles into your Go system designs because it's not really OOP in a traditional sense. So I have a lot of interest in talking about kind of fitting Go into the other things.
Or I guess not fitting them into the other things.
Yes, and being able to decide this is not a good fit for Go. Maybe you should do something else.
One of the things I was thinking of last night as I was thinking of like, what should we talk about in this episode 0, programmer counting. I was like, it'd be really cool if there, since we're from the Go perspective, it could be if we could do some episodes on other languages from the Go perspective, because basically nobody is working in a place where all they do is Go. Usually got to do some Go and some other languages that are kind of floating around. Usually if you're anywhere near a front end, there's some JavaScript, some CSS, some HTML involved. So just doing like, HTML from the Go perspective or PHP from the Go perspective, talking about another language, but how Gophers should maybe look at that, interpret that, see that, and how, like, what are some shared things, what are some different things. So I think maybe that would help avoid Go people doing what other people do to Go, which is bringing all of their conceptions and ideas from their old language into the new one. Because we don't like it when it happens to us. We don't like it when people write that, Java Go or that Ruby Go. But I think other people probably don't like it when, you're writing Go Ruby or Go Java or Go PHP. So I kind of want to explore that as a thing we might be able to do.
That's really good. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ian.
Sure. I think we talk a lot about and Go, like, where you were saying the Gava and the Gython and all of those. But I've recently written a lot of Python, and the biggest feedback I've gotten is like, I'm doing Go things in Python, and it's interesting, right? It's like, yeah.
This is the way.
Yeah. Where are all your classes? What's a class?
Class? I don't know that keyword.
You really don't need classes.
I tend to agree, but some others might not.
It's interesting coming from 15 plus years of C++ and C#. It took me a while to really adjust to the concept of Go structs really are just state holders. They're not classes. And it doesn't work well if you insist on treating them as classes.
Yeah, this is true. I'm at a big Rust shop now, and like trying to not bring any of my Go idioms into like Rust code and Rust idioms into Go code, especially since like Go doesn't support some of the Rust idioms like option and things of that nature. So it's funny how we in the Go community get like not upset or whatever, but we don't like it when people bring their Java into our Go. But yeah, I think this topic is a good topic to talk about. Maybe like a Go versus X language or something every now and then would be nice.
Yeah, I also think saying that you're at a big Rust shop is an understatement. I feel like you're at the Rust shop. So.
Yeah, this is true. This is very true. It's quite a change of pace for me coming from a lot of Go to now being at Oxide, which is huge in Rust. I don't know. Am I even supposed to be on this podcast? Am I allowed to be here now? How does this work? I don't know.
You're like go for behind enemy lines, as some might say.
Exactly.
Or at least as some might view. I don't think I've bought into the whole Rust versus Go. I'm like, they're different languages meant for different things. I think they each have their own little sweet spots.
And Go is very much at like the edge of where software like communicates with one another. That's why it's so big in the cloud field. Is integrations, APIs, CLI tools. Like Go is all over that space. So if you're writing any sort of tool, or if you're running any sort of company, when you integrate with other companies, you're probably going to do that with Go in some ways, right? Especially like think of like Terraform providers, think of like Kubernetes things. That's all going to be like Go code. So you're kind of almost forced to use some Go at your company.
Yeah, I honestly think if Rust would have been around in 2015, 2016, when I started Go, I would have went directly into Rust. Coming from C#, I was very generics and class-based and kind of, I had yet to embrace the simplicity of Go. And it was kind of a jarring thing to come into it and be like, what do you mean I don't have to go have all this ceremony and structure? And then now, 10 years ago, I've kind of gone completely to the other end of the spectrum. And I'm like, I try to learn Rust, and it just feels too complicated, and I don't want to have to work that hard to write code.
I totally agree that it feels really hard writing Rust. Like it's exhausting almost.
There's an extremely high like learning curve to Rust, but once you get over it, you're like, oh, I understand this now. This makes sense. I still hate the compiler because it's always yelling at you, but it does make more sense after some head bashing, I guess. But like, that's one of the things I do want to talk about. Not to make this about Rust at all, but Go has a fantastic standard library, and I feel like there's so many gems in there that we can dive into. And then when you compare and contrast that to other languages, like the kind of idiom in Go is to use the standard library first, right? Like, because what you need is probably in there, and then if you need some other third-party packages, go ahead and write them or find them. But in like Rust, the standard library is not as extensive as Go, right? You're meant to like use crates for kind of almost everything. And it's just, for me, it's jarring and different than what I was used to, right? I was used to like a nice HTTP client in my standard library, but in Rust, it's like, no, go get requests and have fun. So it's just it's very different.
Am I right in thinking even in Rust, like the allocator is a crate that you pull in, and the async runtime is a crate you pull in?
The
Right?
async runtime, yeah, because the async runtime is like a topic of conversation because there's the standard async and then there's also like Tokyo and whatnot. But yeah, it's different, right? It's a very
There
different.
isn't the
idiom.
async runtime.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh yeah. See, even my vernacular is wrong talking about Rust.
Kind of the
async
a
runtime.
flip side of that coin that I'd like to kind of explore at some point is kind of the missing bits from the standard library. Go does have this amazing standard library, but there are some pieces that kind of lots of people feel like should be there and just aren't. One that came up yesterday is a way to express a generics constraint that says this thing should be a pointer. You can do it, but there are several different ways, and it doesn't really work, and it's a bit clunky. And that's to me, there are quite a few things similar to that are like, this is a universal thing. Everyone's going to have to do it. It makes sense to provide it in the standard library once, rather than kind of take the hardline stance of, well, you can just write that yourself, so you should, and we're not going to centralize it.
I've been harping for years on how bad not bad, just how not full featured the Go XML standard library is. I don't know if you've ever were forced into interacting with a SOAP API, but that is an absolute nightmare in Go. Like, just namespacing, like no control, like no
I
canonicalization, no.
I sympathize with your pain, and I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Not go through. Go through.
No, not go through. Fall. Through.
Endure that. Wah, wah.
You got a name drop somewhere. Ding.
Gotta get some sound effects in.
Yeah.
No. When I was writing an XMPP server, I think we used external packages for XML because the standard library was like, this leaves a lot to be desired. I think one of the things I'm excited, or I would like to talk about, is some of those parts of the standard library, parts of Go that you're basically told don't touch that or don't go there, because it's like, oh no, that's dangerous. You might shoot yourself in the foot. Like recently, I've been on this little project of building a database management system for myself for reasons that perhaps we'll also talk about on the podcast at some point. But if you want to build a database management system, there's not really a way of getting around the need to use the unsafe package a lot, because just having to copy around 4 kilobyte pages all of the time is just going to kill your performance. And there's a lot of, like, if you're very careful, there's a lot of, like, really elegant things you can do with the unsafe package, but also a lot of frustrations. But there is this, like, it's like a little bit of magic, and I usually don't like magic in Go, but this little magic, I'm like, oh no, that's very nice. It's like, oh, you can just take this hunk of memory and be like, actually, it's this type, and then you can just, like, pull things out of it. I'm like, that's nice. It gives you a nice little ease of use ergonomics. But I feel like for the most part, for various reasons, usually people are told, like, don't touch that. Don't touch the unsafe package. Don't touch the reflect package. You shouldn't be doing these things. You should be finding other ways. And I'm like, people are going to need to use this every once in a while. So there should be more material on how to use it well.
Agreed. It's funny too, because any sort of like library or feature that involves struct tags is using the reflect package under the hood, and then it's like, no, you don't do that, let them do it. And it's like, but I want to write something with struct tags too. Why can't I touch this is not fair. And I don't know if any of you seen the 1 billion row challenge. I think that was like earlier this year or last year, I forget now. But all the solutions that were like very low time to process all reached for unsafe. Like you had to reach for unsafe if you wanted to like get any of that performance. And you know what you're doing, right? You know that, like, oh, I know that this is always going to be an integer, so I can just read it directly or whatever. And you know these things. And it's just funny, like, you're not supposed to touch these things, but at some point when you know the rules, you can break them.
Yeah, it's like there's Some things are inherently sharp, and that's fine. You just need to put them in the corner with some yellow tape around them and insulate everything else from the sharp edges. But like sometimes you really do need that sharp knife to go do what you need to get done.
Yeah, I actually don't really understand the hesitation for a reflect. I think the Go Reflect package is actually like well documented, well featured. Like it makes sense. I maintain, I think what is the biggest Go fixed width like parsing library, and it's the whole code base is Reflect. And I think I wrote that in like 2 afternoons with like 3 years of Go experience, and it's not crazy. I don't know. Like I get the fear of unsafe, right? Because you can break everything. But I don't know.
Yeah. I do find Reflect can be very tedious.
Tedious, yes.
It's very verbose, and there are a
Very
lot
tedious.
of edge cases, and but it serves a purpose. I've also used it quite a few times to do fairly complex things behind what appears to everything else as a very simple API.
Yeah. I don't know how you get around for any kind of encoding or decoding task. Like you're gonna reach for Reflect.
I don't know if we did. Ian, did you answer the question about what to talk about on the podcast? I feel like we just went off on a tangent and didn't get back to your answer.
Oh no, I
Well, I
don't
feel
think
like we
I
went
have.
to Dylan, and then we just got
We
completely
just
derailed.
went-
And then
yeah.
Matt, you like put yours in there somewhere.
Yeah, I just kind of inserted it in there, and we just kind of skipped Ian.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, so something I've been thinking a lot about recently is, I don't know, there's been this like big DHH push about like no build and, kind of getting rid of build tools. And I don't have an opinion on that, but it's definitely something that appeals to me because, I mean, I do have to work with Webpack on a pretty regular basis, and it is a pain point, and I don't understand it. And I, frankly, am lazy enough that I don't want to understand it. So that seems very appealing, and I don't know. I would like to learn enough to have an opinion on that, and I think that'd be fun to talk about. I think a lot of people, it's in the zeitgeist, and I think it's important. I don't know.
I think that is a good topic to talk about, though. And if anyone hasn't watched any of those DHH interviews, they're pretty good. Like, I mean, there are a lot of like expeltives. So if you're someone that's not into explicit language, maybe figure that out. But they're really good, and the case that he makes is pretty interesting. Basically, like we have HTTP2 now, and we have like concurrent connections, and we have caching benefits from having small files that don't change often rather than large files that change all the time. But it makes sense. It makes sense once you hear like the perspective.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about like our thought patterns are kind of dead weight now, right? Like we need to.
Yeah.
It's not about the tech; it's about how we think about it that needs to change. And I do think I agree with a lot of what he's saying. I don't know if I agree with all of it, but yeah, I don't know. It would be fun to have a panel to discuss that, and I don't know, maybe change my opinion. Who knows?
Yeah, there's a bit of a paradigm shift in the world, though. I mean, today, it's not uncommon for someone to have gigabit internet, so that downloading a 100K bit of code, no one even cares today. Whereas 10 years ago, 12, 15 years ago, that was a big deal. You had to do something just to make it work. Like you couldn't just send snippets of code over the wire and not worry about it.
Sir, I have Xfinity. Okay.
So I don't think you've been on Subway cell service like that.
What? Subway cell service is great. I get
Subway.
like 400 meg down on T-Mobile.
There's no Subway in the swamp.
Yeah,
True.
this is yeah.
I mean, there's the sandwich shop. That's the closest we get.
I will say that my cell service is faster than my home internet, which is a wild thing to say, even like 5 years ago, right?
That 5G baby.
I benefited from our local telephone company decided to expand into television and internet about 20 years ago. And in the process, they laid down fiber all throughout the area, just upfront capital investment, which means today I have gigabit fiber to my house. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because there's only like 30 counties in the country that have done that. And I also grew up in one of those counties. So my parents' home internet is faster than mine, and they live in a 100,000 person town in the middle of Indiana. It's wild.
Must be nice, everyone. Must be nice to have fiber to your home.
First world problems, indeed.
I think I have 2 gig. I mean, I think I could get 2 gig if I wanted it from Fios. Because, I mean, that's the perk of living in Manhattan. You get the nice things.
This is true.
Well, I mean, but while we're on a tangent, the other day, I think maybe not the other day, like 2 months ago, some Verizon tech disconnected my service and was just like, no, I didn't. So I didn't have internet for like 6 hours, and it was very unfortunate. It made me like rethink setting up a backup WAN connection, which I've been kind of dragging my feet on. But that's another topic I'd love to talk about. It's like home lab networking, that type of stuff. Because I feel like that's an excellent space to write a little bit of Go code to do some home automation, some network automation, that sort of fun little stuff there. But circling back to the web pack and that conversation, I do think it's interesting that like now like it. I don't think people really understand just how much we don't need to like compress things down. It's like, yeah, no, like the HTTP will do that for you. It'll gzip it all when it's shipping it. Like the benefits you get from all of these other things you're doing. It's just like, not as much as what you had, 10, 12 years ago. Although HTTP has been around long enough that it's like, I don't know, even back then, did we actually need these things? But I feel like that's something that I'm also like sort of struggling with in the Go world at the moment is like removing some of the habits I had from, what is it, like I think like 12, 13 years of writing Go now that I've been doing. So it's like I have a lot of those Go 1.2 habits that I developed, and I need to like kind of shed some of those away. I have been embracing generics a lot as of late. I don't hate them as much as I thought I would. I think I hate more that we have something that is inches away from being a sum type or a union type, but we don't actually have sum or union types, and that is annoying me a lot more than I thought it would. So it's like another topic I'd like to discuss is just like, what things do we want in Go that just aren't there or are almost there, and we can kind of see them, and it frustrates us that we don't have
I think
them.
union/option/sum types may be the single most common request in the Go for Slack.
Option would be really nice, just because like it's so frustrating to have to pass a pointer to a Boolean to some SDK just because they want that. And I'm like, now I have to go either create a Boolean, grab a pointer to it, or call one of your like SDK.bool pointer functions that you export.
AWS.bool.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, this feels wrong. We shouldn't have to do this. The language should do this for us.
Speaking of missing from the standard library, there should be a pointer to function that gives you a pointer to a constant value of whatever the type is. We shouldn't have to rewrite that function infinity
It's gotten
times.
turned down like 6 times, I'm pretty sure.
For some reason, I thought that was something that actually got added, but maybe that's just like in some other library I'm thinking about.
It was the dream you had. No.
That's one of the first things I add to everything is like a pointer package. That's just pointer.to, pointer.from, pointer.default.
I feel like there are quite a few of those that are just like, this is, yes, it's 50 to 100 lines of fairly straightforward code, but it just doesn't need to be repeated in every project across the entire ecosystem.
I think it's closer to like 12 lines with generics now.
Yeah, but you have to write comments and documentation.
True. Okay. Yeah, I was.
Actually,
You're
that's
right.
a good
You're
that's
right.
a good segue to something that I want to talk about on this podcast. Speaking of comments and documentation, so like one of my favorite things about Go Time itself was Kris always like coming in from the perspective of like language and just making sure that things are documented well and we're using the right terminology for things. And I remember you went on this big like discussion about async, await, and whatnot. And I think that's important because I see a lot of Go makes it so easy to write like docs in code comments, or even just format errorf to add a little bit more context to your error. And yet so many developers are just not doing any of this stuff. It's like, if error does not equal nil, return error. Can you just return format errorf and just add something a little bit more information? Because now, like, I may not have access to the line that's failing, and I want to know a little bit more about what's going on. And just, I guess what I'm trying to say is talking about making your code more like greppable, more like readable from like a perspective of not just reading the code, but what it's actually doing and commenting and documentation. So I want to talk a bit more about that stuff. And I always found myself in the go time stuff, like when Kris was going on like some discussions, I'm like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Kris gets it. So now I get to actually talk to Kris and have more of these discussions.
Semi-troll counterpoint. You end up with your ultimate handler being a HTTP response.write error, and it's a string with 17 colons in it, just cascading all the way back down the stack.
This is true. Yeah, I mean, you should never put that in front of an actual client or user. But yeah, I get what you're saying. But it's something that's important to like talk about when you're designing things in a language. Because if you just keep returning error all the way up the stack, great. I have no idea what this means, where this came from. Odds are you probably don't even have tracing or logging or whatever set up correctly in your app. You don't. Let's be real. We know you don't. You don't have time for that. It's not on the agenda. So like we know you don't. It's okay. And it just makes everyone's life harder to understand where this comes from.
Actually, very much agree. That's a very broad topic of what's the right way to propagate context and return errors, where you give your caller enough information to deal with it correctly without leaking internal details or generating error messages that have 17 colons and eventually land in some message from some third-party library that's 8 layers of dependencies away that no one really can do anything with.
Yeah, I think there's very little guidance on how to do errors well in the community.
Well, I mean, the errors package didn't help either, because a lot of the powerful stuff was added like later in Go's life. You know, like is and as and join and whatever, all those things, they were added later. So people made their own errors package, or they just said, screw it, I'm going to, you know, if error is not equal nil, return error everywhere and forget about it. Nowadays, like if you're writing a fresh Go program, you have a lot of options at your fingertips for error handling, especially when it comes to like multi-error and joining errors together. Like that's actually really nice. So I don't know. I think that's a good topic of conversation to kind of remind the community of where we're at with that.
I think that's one of the frustrations that I've had, and like, so it's even something I forget to do a lot, is just like sit down and actually design how your errors are going to work. It's like, no, maybe, like if I'm writing a library or a package, it's like I should have one error type or a small number of error types that I'm going to produce outward, so you can actually either type switch on them or use error.is or error.as to actually extract out that concrete error type and do more with it. I would love if there was a nice little standardized like stack trace that we could just shove into errors as well, because that's something I'm in want of a lot, where I'm just like, okay, I got like an like unexpected EOF. Like, where did that come from? It came from somewhere, but everybody is just like returning, or like, if error does not equal nil, return error all the way up the stack. And you're like, this came from someplace. Please help me. It'd be nice if it just kind of, you had the option to just spit out a little stack trace. It's like, oh, it came from here. Like, this is the path it went through. Same thing with context. I feel like context is another area where I just love to dig into, like, what types of things could we do with it that are different. Because I feel like that whole type got introduced into Go very carefully, because people are like, this is not a garbage bag. Do not just throw parameters in here that, or try to like smuggle things down a few layers in this type.
It's so convenient. It's already there.
It is. It's very convenient, but it's also, it makes your code so much more difficult to understand. but I think that that's those type of topics as well, just like code design and how you structure things and what you should think about when you're designing libraries and your APIs and your application. So I think there's a lot of opinions out there, but I don't know if there's like a solid like this is how you should start thinking about it from a kind of more neutral perspective. Because if there's one thing Gophers are, they're pretty opinionated. So
I think there's a lot of value in kind of, rather than just throwing out a this is how you should do it, talk about these are the things that you should think about. That because it's always a gray area. Like the right answer is going to depend on your system, but there are some commonalities where you should think about is your consumer going to be able to tell between what kind of thing actually went wrong? Or is this an error that your library generated, or is it some transitive thing, an IO EOF from something else that they don't even know about? Those things become important, and they can generate a real inflection point in terms of, do people actually enjoy using your thing?
Yeah. I think like the specifically around errors, I think a lot of the community approaches it with the mindset of like, oh, I'm just going to propagate my error, like whatever errors I encounter, I'll propagate to my caller, and my caller will deal with it. And then everyone ends up thinking that same thing. My caller will deal with it. But at some point you have to realize you are the caller and you need to deal with this stuff. Like IOEOF is an easy error to talk about because it's so ubiquitous. But like SQL no rows is another one, right? Or no, whatever it is, error no row, I forget what it's called. But that's another one too, especially if you're writing like delete handlers for something and you want to delete something. Well, if there's no rows, it's already deleted. So what do you do? Right? Like, but you wouldn't know that if you just returned an error blindly back up the call stack. You have to kind of assert on that. And yeah, I think that's the conversations we should have to challenge that. Like, oh, I'll just make my caller handle it. Well, you are the caller. The call is inside the house. It's you. You're the caller. Fix it.
Yeah, I'm also excited to talk about some of our more strong opinions, because I think those will make some excellent content. Like, I have realized that I think we were talking. I think Dylan, I was talking with you and some other people at GopherCon about this, about just our disdain for if-else statements, and it's just like, just use a switch. And I find myself just going to use switches all over the place, because I'm like, yeah, you know what? If-else, it sucks. I don't like this thing. Like, I barely like using if statements. I think that comes from like my past too, where it was like Go was like, no, you put the default thing and then you do the if, and then you do, so like that kind of inverted way, so you're not indenting things too much. But no, I'm a big fan now of switch statements and just using them instead of if else. And I feel like
If else is just a switch with a case and a default.
Yeah.
I just don't like the cases being at the same level of indent as the switch. It bugs me.
That bugs me as well.
It really bugs me. Like, it means nothing, but it bugs me, because
I think it makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah. But it's like you opened a brace. You need to move in now, please. Like, what are you doing?
It's like,
Well, that's what's so good about Thumped is that's not what I would have chosen, but I think it was the right choice.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, kind of the proverb, no one likes GoPumped, but everyone loves GoPumped.
yeah, no one likes the GoFumped format, but everyone loves GoFumped. It's like, yeah, no, we enjoy having it, because it just makes it so you don't wind up arguing over things like this for hours on end.
Yes.
There's another thing it does that drives me nuts. If you have a really long struct, it'll line up like the first 15 like types and stuff, and then it'll decide on another alignment and continue, and then it'll decide on another alignment, and I don't know why, but that drives me insane.
That's a subtle push to tell you your structs are too big.
Well, sometimes you can't do anything about it.
I do wish I could have, like, even though I have like comments between things, I'm like, I still want you to format as if those comments weren't there. Like, I just want it to look pretty, and it doesn't do that, which makes me sad. But
Yeah, there's definitely some value there, because I can remember spending literal hours formatting C++ code and adding spaces and aligning things, and just protracted religious debates about what's the right way to format this thing. And whether parameter lists should have line breaks in them, and if so, should every parameter be on a new line, and do you indent the brace or not, and end of line or on the next line, and just all of these, in retrospect, completely invaluable debates because it's just white space.
It's weird. Like, I just want readable code. I'm not the biggest fan of Go format either, but at the same time, it helps us and it keeps us all aligned on the syntax. But sometimes it gives you an unnecessary diff that you don't need. Like, I'm just changing one line. I don't need to realign the whole block. And now, like, my reviewer that might not be understanding what's going on. Like, if you're not using, like, maybe GitHub, you don't see the actual change line. Everything looks like a change line. It's like, no, I promise I didn't change this whole thing. I just changed this one thing, I swear.
Ignore white space diffs.
Yeah.
I think there's a
Blame doesn't ignore white space, so
Yeah,
we're still in trouble.
At least we're not Python where white space is significant.
True.
YAML.
Or
Yeah.
YAML.
Yep.
Yeah, I recently had a Python bug I just could not figure out. And what I had done is auto-formatted the file, and it had decided that a definition was not part of a class anymore. And my non-Python brain did not see that for like a good 10 solid minutes.
Having to
say
spend
that's
some
where,
time working on Python is why I have show white space enabled in my editor.
Same. I have show weights or set list actually, but I have I've seen, like, this is what part of the reason why I like Go format, because if you take YAML or Python to someone else with their editor and they have like an auto formatter, and then they're gonna give you back different Python or different YAML, and I'm like, wait a minute, I gave you this YAML with 2 space indents. Why do we have like tab indents now? Why do we have 4 space? What happened here? I just wanted you to change one part of this YAML file, and you gave me a whole different file. What's going on?
Yeah. Well, I hope for you, listener, that you have a good idea of what we're going to talk about on this podcast, or what we hope to talk about. Obviously, we're keeping the same spice as Go Time. We're going to have some disagreements, and it's going to be some wild times. And I promise I will have my nice little monologues that I do sometimes about why we need to care about Oxford commas some more, or something like that. As far as format, though, we're also changing things up a little bit there. We're gonna have more of these panel episodes, of course. I know something that I've really wanted to do with Go Time, and I'm kind of excited to at least try to do with Fall Through, are more mini-series, more like little bundled episodes, because I think a lot of the topics we talked about on Go Time, we tried to keep the podcast to about an hour, and there were so many things where it's like, nah, we need like 3 hours to talk about this, to really get through this. So I'd really love to actually be able to have that space to not necessarily ship a 3-hour podcast, but maybe ship 3 1-hour podcasts or something like that. You should expect some changes in how the format works for Fall Through. It's gonna take me a little bit to not call it Go Time. I'm gonna slip up.
You are gonna have to get a new poster back there.
Yeah, the poster doesn't help.
I'm going to have to get a new. Yes, I will have to get a new poster. Once we, either once we settle on keeping the little logo that I threw together, or get a new one that's maybe a little bit more graphic designed. We'll see.
Over the first N episodes, you need to gradually overlay the Go Time poster with the new logo.
The new one just kind of slowly phases in, like it starts to shift over as the new one shifts in.
Just print it off on printer paper and make it a little bit bigger each time. Just stick it there.
All right, and we have two little things to cover before we wrap up. We do plan on keeping some of the old staples of Go Time. So we have hope that we will still be able to get the Go team on the podcast to talk about, all the various things that they're up to and all of that. We are also planning on having those Go release coverage episodes. Because I think a lot of people found value in that, just being able to, throw in a podcast and listen to, like, what's new in Go 124, 125, 120, whatever. And of course, we're going to do our best to cover Go current news and events and things going on So you should expect to still be able to hear about that. We still plan on being a podcast about Go. It's just about Go from the perspective of Go and that wider purview. And one other thing we're keeping with us is unpopular opinions, because we know you all love that. And since this is episode 0, we can't go without unpopular opinions. So what do you guys got? Who wants to go first?
Roll the jingle. Oh wait, we don't have those yet. Roll the jingle.
We don't have any jingles yet. Oh no.
Unpopular opinion, jingle stuck.
No music podcasts are better. All right, Ian, do you got anything?
Kind of. This might have come up, but this is a whole new podcast, so I'm gonna recycle. I think the option type in Go, or option types, monads, whatever you want to call them, are kind of inevitable. They're going to happen. Like, there's going to be resistance. Eventually, it's going to happen. People are going to... Yeah, I just think it's inevitable. Especially with how generics are going and well received. Like, yeah. Just...
No, I agree with that, and I think that it'll also help fix error handling and Go. So I think once you have option types or sum types or whatever we call them, whatever implementation we wind up with, we'll finally be able to deal with, like, we won't have this weird nil stuff, and you can just be like, is this thing in error? Okay, great, let's go do something with it. Or what type of error is it? I think it'll help with error handling a lot.
And then things like the SQL package and everything won't have to implement their own containers that are like, this could be nil, or it could be empty, you know?
The null SQL null string or whatever it's called. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
There's a generic SQL.null now, which is great, but...
You know, I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion, but... Because everyone here is agreeing with you, I believe.
I think if you put that in the Go GitHub, a proposal about it would be shot down immediately.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I think
there's definitely a big segment of the community that would revolt and be like, no, we don't need it.
I'm not sure we need it. I'm not even saying I like it. I don't know if I have an opinion on that yet. I just think it's inevitable. Like, it's possible to do now. It's going to happen.
Okay.
That's fair. Time will tell.
Matt, do you have an unpopular opinion?
Yes, I do. It's not Go specific, but it'll do. So my unpopular opinion is that relative time sucks. So when you are in user interfaces and you see relative time like this was created 2 hours ago, or 30 seconds ago, or like 3 weeks ago, I cannot stand it. I think it's useless. I just want to see the actual timestamp of when this thing was really created or modified or whatever.
I fully disagree with you right off the bat.
No, I fully
that's
agree
fair
with you.
That's perfectly fair. I find myself, and I'm looking at this through the lens of like an engineer, someone who's working on like code and such. I find myself always trying to like hover over these relative timestamps to get the actual timestamp that I want back. But yeah, I think they suck and I don't like them. So yeah, that's my opinion.
Someone that is horrible at doing arithmetic, I cannot look at a date and be like, that's 2 months ago. No.
That's fair.
That would make my user experience a lot worse.
On the other hand, sometimes you guys are slow to update. Like, iMessages us all the time where it's like, sent yesterday. And I'm like, huh? And then it'll refresh. It'll be like, sent Saturday. And I'm like, oh, all right. So that's definitely a case where I hate it. It was in the UI. It doesn't refresh in time. And it's
Or they do the LinkedIn way of like over-promising or under-delivering, where it's like sent 2 days ago. It was actually sent 12 hours ago. What do you mean 2 days ago? Well, actually, it fell on this weird boundary. Like, come on, man. Just don't lie to me, please.
I do think
it
you
was
should always be
published
able to
from one of
hover.
those South Pacific islands where
Exactly.
June 17th, 1965 didn't actually occur.
Exactly.
I do think you should always be able to hover and get the actual date, though. It annoys me a lot when you can't.
I think if that's what the behavior was normally, I probably wouldn't have this unpopular opinion. But I found many websites where you cannot hover and get the actual date, and you're stuck going into like the inspect view or hit an API or something else to find the actual stamp that you need.
Oof. All
Isn't
right.
there an HTML element specifically for this?
Yes.
Is there? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I believe it's in HTML now. If not, people have built as a custom element, a million times. So, all right, Dylan. I mean, I know you have many unpopular opinions. Can you grace us with
I
one?
didn't prepare ahead of time, but I'll go completely outside of the tech sphere and say we should just stay on daylight savings time. Full stop.
Oh, thank God. Yes, please.
Yeah. Make EST
Like, don't change.
the EDT.
There are lots of camps that are, we should just not change. Yeah, fine, but let's stay on the DST mode, not the standard time mode.
But is
Yeah.
this worldwide?
I mean, the U.S.
Right. But like that's what I'm saying. Like, because it's weird doing the math from US. Like when we like jump back and forward, then there's other places that have a slightly like time variance too, and they're like 30 minutes off from where you are, and doing the math gets weird. So I don't know. For me, I would like to see this, but at the same time, I don't know. And I also forgot that daylight savings time was US only and not global.
I mean,
I think there are
it's
other
U.S.
places,
plus
right?
a patchwork of
Plus
other countries. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like specific to us. I
Then
forgot
you
about
have-
that.
Is it Arizona or New Mexico that opts out?
Oh, I think it's
I think
Arizona.
it's Arizona. I think it's Arizona.
But then there's like the Indian reservations within Arizona that don't. So you can actually drive across a certain part of Arizona and like I think change times like 12 times as you're driving because you keep entering and exiting different sovereign territories.
Like the Kansas-Missouri border is the Central Time, Mountain Time. So part of St. Louis or St. Louis, Missouri is Central Time, and the other side of the river is Mountain Time. So you drive 5 minutes, and it's an hour different. Just
I had a manager that was in Arizona, and twice a year we'd go through the calendar shuffle. Does this new time for the meetings work well, or is this other time? And it's like, this. Can we just eliminate this forever?
So
Well-
I grew up in Indiana, and they do daylight savings time, except there's 12 counties that were just like, no, we're not doing that. So part of the state switches, but not the right. I don't know if that's still the case, but that at least was the case.
I guess to compound the unpopularness, we should ostracize those people who just are belligerently different. No, we're
See,
not.
this is
gonna
what I
do
mean by
it.
worldwide. I just want everyone to agree. Okay, this is what I mean.
Yeah.
We should refuse to have commerce with those people who won't synchronize their clocks.
Everyone on UTC, no exceptions.
I wasn't going to have an unpopular opinion, but I will have the unpopular opinion that time zones are a good thing. Like, I think a lot of people are like, why do we have time zones? We shouldn't have time zones. And it's like, nah, you need to understand what a time means. Because if you're like, it's 3 a.m., and you want to talk to someone that's halfway across the world, it's like, is that the middle of the day for them, or is that the middle of the night for them, or some other time? Like, is it okay for me to call them? Like, I have no idea. So I like being like, no, if it's 3 a.m. where they are, probably don't call them.
But you think those time zones should not shift?
Yeah, I
Like-
think we
like-
shouldn't be
like-
moving these time zones. Like, I don't think a same region should have two different time zones depending on
Okay.
what time of year it is. Like, the fact that we
I
have
don't-
EST and EDT just is very annoying.
I stopped
think this
saying
is-
those. I just use U.S. Eastern time now because I was like, I don't know which one we're in anymore. I'm just U.S. Eastern time. I'm done.
Yeah.
I hope this is a popular opinion, but no one thinks you should store data in anything but UTC, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like, you should not. Like, don't store data with time zones. That's... I mean, if you can, just store it as, like, Unix time. Like, that's
No, the true way is to store it as relative time and constantly make updates to the database as that changes. That's the only way you can do it.
I will counter that. I have run into a handful of cases where the time zone, in effect, when it was recorded, did matter. And if you just translate to UTC and store it, you lose that.
Yeah. No, I get that.
We have to write extra code to make sure you handle that properly.
Yes.
All right. So, yeah. Here we are at the end of episode 0. It's slash, I was going to call it a trailer, but I don't think you can have like a 55-minute trailer. So
Depends on how long the main event is.
This was supposed to be 15 minutes long, y'all. So
yeah.
We'll call it a pilot.
Yeah, I mean, like, hey, we're here. We're still Go Time. So, running long and having innumerable tangents is, just what we are. So we're a successor. So we're hope to be different in some ways. But, I like to think that the listeners like our tangents. They like going on a little bit of a winding adventure with us. So
if you don't, comment and tell us that you don't.
Yeah, if you absolutely hate that we can't stay on topic, just let us know.
Yeah, give us feedback. That we'd love to hear from the listeners.
Yeah, and listeners, like, tell us what you would like us to cover. What things are you interested in hearing and having discussions about? What miniseries would you like us to do? Like, I really want you to cover like this topic. I haven't seen someone cover this topic. Because that's what we're here for. It's to produce content for y'all. So yeah, we'll be rolling out all of the various things, all the various social media, all of those things over time. And yeah, excited. So I guess final thoughts from you guys before we close out this episode. Any kind of final words?
Like and subscribe. Sorry, wait, that's the wrong platform.
Hit the bell.
I mean, we're going to be on YouTube, so yes.
Click the bell.
Like and subscribe. Yeah. Get notifications.
Yeah. Subscribe, click the bell.
Links in the description.
I do like the name. I'll say that. As a final thought for me, I like the name. It's clever. It's very clever.
It's just nerdy enough.
Yeah. So, good job on that.
Hooray! And with that, we're out. We're done. No music. So I guess this is just kind of where it ends.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, can't wait to do it some more.
Yes, good time.
Quick housekeeping note: Go Time is still shipping through the rest of this year. So the first episodes of Fallthrough will be hitting your podcast players in January. So get ready for that. But yeah, thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time. Bye,
See
everybody.
you, everyone.